Managed Canada's first stand-up comedy club.
Yeah, that was wild.
What's the context behind that, and how do you end up being the first at that when when you had been in a different field?
Well, interesting. Now, this is again for you folks listening out there, and there's a lot of you. Here's a tip. I was networking before I knew what networking was.
Hmm.
I just didn't know it was called that. For
Like meeting
example,
people for business,
networking. Sorry?
just like meeting new people for business, or what? How did you think? What did you think it was?
Meet lots of people. One guy said to me, I work with a lot of young people, and the guy said, "Yeah, it's all about who you know." And I said, "Well, go know some people then. Get off your ass. Go
Right.
get to know some people." Yes, it is who you know, but that doesn't exempt you. There's not some special magic wand that Buster has. Ping, he knows people. You worked your ass off to go and know people since you were probably 14 years old, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. So anyway, uh, I went to school with this man named Mark Breslin. He studied English Lit at York. And I was working in this place called, I don't know, the Great Muffin, or it was called the Great Canadian Muffin. I don't wave, I'm not a flag waver or anything, but you know, it was called the Great Canadian Muffin Factory or something. You have these chains. I was making muffins and serving soup at 27. I was embarrassed, but I was a writer. So in walks Mark, and I was a little bit humiliated. Had to wear like a engineer's hat, like a railroad engineer. The
Yeah.
coveralls. Have you had a McJob like that ever? I don't know. It's like we call them McJobs up here. Anyway, so I'm a little bit humiliated. There's this friend Mark. I'm serving him soup and a muffin, right? He says, "What are you doing?" I said, "Well, I'm a writer and I'm working at this and that and film, and this is a between job." And he said, "I'm opening a comedy club. Come and see me." So I wasn't the startup, he was, but I knew him. And he was a very smart entrepreneur. And he had been to New York, to Carolines, and all the places in New York City, right? So this was 1977. So there were no comedy clubs in Toronto, like stand-up comedy clubs. It wasn't known, right?
Right.
So he tapped me. I said, "Yeah, I'm in. Let's do it." And no experience managing a club. See, this is when you have friends, right? They say, "Yeah, let's try it. You seem like a reasonable man." And I had a ball. I met Robin Williams.
Oh, go. I didn't mean to cut you off on that one.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if you know, Buster, but in the stand-up comedy world, there's an agreement amongst comics that when they make it big, they always drop into the local comedy club when they're in town and do a set. It's payback time, right? And, they get to practice. He was just breaking in Mork and Mindy at that time. And he had been up on a talk show or something. So I'm there one night, I'm managing the club. It's like, okay, everything's great. And on Mark comes the stage, the tiny little stage, and says, "Ladies and gentlemen, we have a special guest tonight. Please welcome Vladimir Vladivostok." And on comes Robin as a Russian poet.
Oh my
He, he
God.
could, he could only do that in Canada. In the U.S., they kill him. He's Soviet, right? So he comes on. He does this whole skit as a Russian poet, like in character. He was brilliant. He was brilliant. Do you know Jim Carrey, the movie actor?
One of
So
my favorite of all time.
okay, so he came that first year. He was 17. His dad brought him, and he was an impressionist, and he was brilliant impressionist. And Howie Mandel also went to my high school. He showed up there, a very funny guy. So as you know, we export world famous musicians and comics from Toronto. Mike Myers, Howie Mandel, Jim Carrey, Drake, Bieber, who else? Shawn Mendes, Alicia Cara. We just, I don't know what it is in Toronto, but it's a very vibrant scene. But we're also really competitive. And at one time, I checked the Billboard top 10 for the world.
And it was mostly,
7 were Canadian, not
wow.
just Canadian, 7 of the top 10 in the world, number one songs and artists were from Toronto
Wow.
or within an hour of here.
I want to ask more. Do you remember what impressions Jim Carrey was doing at the comedy club at age 17 when his dad had to bring him?
Sammy Davis Jr., brilliant.
Really?
Johnny Carson. It was a different time, right? It was the
Oh,
70s, so people that you wouldn't do now. But you know why I knew he was a genius?
why?
And you probably know this from basketball. There are people who have so much talent that they take it to a certain point and then they go a little bit further and you go, what? No, this guy's insane. He's going to do that. So Jim was, as you can imagine, was very physically agile. It was physical comedy, right? So Sammy Davis Jr., who I don't know if you know of him, but he was a big star, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Sammy, he'd do this whole thing with, he'd get the jaw right and talk like Sammy, then he'd sing it, and his hand would be up like this. He was a brilliant physical comic. And of course, Robin. And also, I could see that Howie was going to make it because he was a carpet salesman. He was working at his dad's store as a carpet salesman. And he comes in and he was just, you could see he had it because he had charisma. He
Mm.
had the audience in the palm of his hand, right? So, yeah, that was pretty awesome.